one of my father's fiercest, most committed and dedicated advocates who has made it possible for us to get to the point we're at today. So definitely want to give you your flowers, but I think we all should give her a round of applause for all her work. Her name is Billy Billy. And last but certainly not least, if you thought this film was compelling, I can assure you some of the top 5 moments come from this man's opinion right here. He is currently representing Wayne Akbar Prey at the federal level right now. He's somebody who truly understands the stakes from the lived experiences, and not just from the fact that he's somewhat of a celebrity, but he's incredibly competent, incredibly intelligent, and incredibly accomplished. Everybody, if you could please welcome again, Mr. Isaac Wright Jr. And moderating the panel, again, we have the incredible Miss Madam President Deborah Baker. Yes. So we're going to pass this mic around, so we just hope that you guys can just share the microphone. You will stand from there.
Yep. So we don't have a lot of time because we waited for you to come, but this is too important for you just to look at it and go home and not have conversation about it. We need to have conversation about it. We need to hear from 3 of the people who are so entwined in the notion of mass incarceration. They use Akbar Prey and Anthony Stutson as poster children, but it is it's so much greater. We wonder about where our men are and where we're getting, where we're going. Well, this is reducing and reframing our criminal justice system is a way to bring our fathers home, our husbands, our lovers, our sons. And so I want to start with you, Mr. Freeman. Thank you so much for this inspiring film. So I heard you say something in the beginning, but I still want to ask you, what was the thing that got you going with this film?
So mainly I wrote like street tales, I guess you could say. And I had an actual scripted TV show called 848 that was going to come out before COVID.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Okay.
Here, so.
All right, so I had a scripted TV show called 848 that was coming out before COVID. And when COVID hit, the production company backed out because everything shut down. So when it started back up, they had moved on to something else. And so I pitched it to another producer, and she told me, like, it's just another crime show. What's the hook? She said, you need to find the hook. So I was like, I didn't really, And at the time, I was working on a documentary called Live from Broadway. And I had reached out to Akbar Prey to interview him about his being a boxing promoter. And he told me that he was trying to get back in court. And he was telling me, a little bit about his plight. And at the same time, Anthony Stutson hit me. And I had wrote a story about Anthony Stutson in 2012. And at that time, he thought he was going to come home because of the bill that Obama signed. Not the First Step Act, the one before the Fair Sentencing Act. So he thought he was going to come home, and after I did the story, so he hits me, it's 10 years later, and he's telling me he's trying to get back in court, and I said, that's my hook. So I changed it from a scripted series to a documentary, and it started having purpose instead of just being entertainment. And I just started getting more and more, interested in what was going on. And I started realizing that a lot of people that I had written about were still in these same positions. So that's what inspired me to create the film.
And so just to say, you're willing to take this film around the state so that there are people who are here who are interested. I see the New Brunswick NAACP president, people who are interested in taking this because it's small, but we can do more with this, and we need to do more with this. I'm going to move to social justice activist Millie Harris, who is also the co-founder of the Wayne Aqua Foundation for Change. Foundation for Change.
Yes, that's correct. Okay. Let me just explain who I am. I'm a social studies teacher here in Newark. And in addition to teaching high school students in the daytime, I also teach adults at night. I had not seen Akbar for 25 years when I began to hear his name ringing around my school among people that were very well respected. And I hadn't really, I'm not going to lie to you, I hadn't thought about him for about a good 25 years, but I decided to do some research. I looked him up, and I started to see the stuff that he was writing in Dom Diva magazine. And I didn't know how to get in touch with him. I saw he had a Facebook, but I didn't know if you could do that from prison. Anyway, long story short, I saw his writings, and they were fascinating, and I took them to my school and my students. And Raz Baraka was my principal at the time, and I ultimately, when I saw that the reaction that the students were having to these writings that I found, like in Don Diva magazine, things like the snitch factor, where he really describes how this concept of snitching has turned our communities upside down. And I brought it to my principal's attention and asked him if we could begin to use the writings. And it was absolutely incredible, the results that I was getting from the kids. They asked me who he was, and I said, why don't you go home and ask somebody over 50? And the next day, one of the kids came in and he said, yeah, he used to hang out at my house. He wore fur shoes. And they wanted to know where the money was buried because they just knew it was buried somewhere. But what I realized was, oh, it's buried at your house? What I realized was that a lot of my students, their fathers, many of their fathers were in similar situations. Many of my students had parents who had been incarcerated, who were currently at that time doing life sentences, and many of my students were also in gangs. And I realized that the gang had, in many ways, taken the place of the nuclear family, because so many men in the community were missing that while initially they may have thought that they were doing something good by putting these so-called criminals away, what they were doing was putting away the patriarchs of families. Mm-hmm. And when I spoke to Al, one of the first things I said to him was, your greatest crime was that you were a patriarch and a person who was about, raising his children, but also he was an important member of the community all around, because he did provide legitimate jobs for a lot of people, and people who could not get those jobs. So anyway, I also started using one of his books, Last of a Dying Breed, in my adult sociology class. And many of my night school students, they're my age, so they knew a lot of these stories vicariously, through other people. But what they began to see, the reason that I was using it in a sociology class and allowed to use it, was because the environment shapes the human, shapes the person. And the analysis of the book was based on really, what would you do in these situations? And what is normal in one place is not normal in another. And, you know, when I started teaching, I began to teach later in life. I was almost 50. And I realized that a lot of my students thought that they lived in the hood because they liked it. Well, we like the hood. It's where we want to be. We're trifling. We don't want to do anything. And then what they failed to understand was that the system was rigged against them, that this is a problem of institutional racism that goes as far back as the end of slavery. When you look at the 13th Amendment and it ends slavery, it also says, except the conditions of incarceration. So that's my role. I helped to start the I Pray Foundation for Change because I thought that the message that he was bringing young people was critically important at a time where, I'm from Newark all my life. I mean, I remember when there were jobs here. When the jobs left, drugs became the only game in town. So, thank you.
Mr. Isaac Wright, you probably are familiar with his stories. There was a series on television called Life, and it was based on his life. And you saw him throughout the film, and you saw what it said: falsely accused and convicted, life imprisonment. So, needless to say, that did not happen. I think I want you to give how you were able to get through the process, to become that attorney that was able not only to free yourself, but to get others free.
So I guess the best place for me to start is before my incarceration, before the accusations against me. Because one of the things that's important to us as a community is to understand our gifts, how important we are as a community, how intelligent we are as a community, and how successful we would be in comparison to the opportunities that presents itself for us. You know, and so one of the things that plagues us is the lack of opportunity, because we change the competition scale when we are invited in. We change the dynamics. Okay, so that's very important for me to say to begin this. I was very successful before I was arrested. I had my own music company. I was married at the time. My wife was selling millions of records with a group called the Cover Girls. I was on top of the world, and I was in my 20s. Right? So the reason why that's important is because when I went to jail, and I'm using this background of my success as a black man to say that the moment I picked up a law book, that's when I found myself. That's when I realized who I really was. Even though I was successful before I went to jail, I had no idea who I was until I was confronted with being the best that I could be. That's when I found out. So when I picked up that first law book, it felt like I was doing it all my life. And at that point, there's an understanding that you're on a divine journey. There's an understanding that there's something happening in your life that's bigger than you. And when you see all this destruction going on around you, not just with the people that are locked up beside you, but with the family that needs you on the outside, with the mother, the father, the sister, the brother, the children, the wife, all these people that are falling apart in your absence, that are going astray. When you look at all these things and you search for a coping mechanism, that coping mechanism is in the gifts. that you were ordained with at birth. And so prison brought me to a place where I discovered a gift that put me on a journey that sits me right here before you guys right now. So the realization of what was happening to me put me in a position to be willing to die before I sell my soul. To be willing to die before I let the system do to my family what they were doing to them through me. This wasn't an issue. I didn't look at this as an attack on me as an individual. I looked at this as an attack on my family. My father was in the military for 30 years. He served in Vietnam and Korea. How are you doing this to his son? He fought for this country, almost died for this country. And I can't get a shiver of justice. So at that point, this was a situation where I wasn't even fighting for my life. I was fighting for the lives of the people that I loved. I was fighting for the guys that were sitting next to me that couldn't fight for themselves. And I realized in that moment that I was there for a reason. And so when I went on my journey and I began to teach myself the law, never been in trouble a day in my life, had no clue what it meant to be in jail. And to give you an idea, a guy would come in, I just took a plea for 5 years. I'd almost faint. 5 years? Mind you, I'm going to get life. But just to give you an idea of how green I was in the system, I thought 5 years was the rest of my life. And I couldn't understand why he would even take a plea for 5 years. Not knowing that there was a life sentence awaiting me. Okay? So, and this is very, very important because this is a reflection of what was happening in our community at the time. Every lawyer that came in was asking me, almost forcing me to plead guilty to something I didn't do. The more I said that I didn't do it, the more they were pushing for me to plead guilty. And it was strange because growing up in a military family, you have this idea that truth, diplomacy, the chain of command, the laws are something that you reverend for the betterment of mankind. So when they were telling me to plead guilty, even though I was saying I was innocent, I was confused. And it dawned on me at that point. I mean, I learned very quickly that the fix was in that. This is not something, it was a mirage that I thought about the system. It wasn't real. I began to realize what it was really about. And I pivoted. The moment I understood what was happening to me, I made a pivot. And I understood that if I was going to go to jail for the rest of my life, it was going to be because of me.
That's right.
I was never going to allow an individual to come in, take control of my life, send me to prison for the rest of my life, and die there not doing something for myself. So I was alone. And there's a lot of people in here who can understand what I'm about to say. Alone doesn't mean that you don't have family that love you. Alone doesn't mean in a system that you don't have people who care about what happens to you. Alone means that we're caught in a mechanism that is designed to make sure they can't help you. To make sure that the only thing that they can do for you is send you a food package here and there, and maybe gather up some money for a lawyer that's going to sell you out. That's what alone means. So when I understood that I was alone, that this was about me and them, I decided I was going to represent myself. I didn't know how much that gift was going to make the kind of changes it made along the next 7.5 years. I had life plus 70. That turned into 7.5 years. It's a very, very short time when you have life plus 70.
Yes.
So, not to get into a very, very long story, I moved through the system causing destruction every step that I made. And this is what I mean when I say that. And this is the power that we have as black people. I moved through the system making sure that every officer in the prison that did something wrong lost their job or was sent home.
Go ahead.
That every prosecutor that made the wrong choice was reprimanded or was put on Front Street or fired. I did everything in my power to make changes and to make sure that when I walked away, there was nothing there but a bunch of demolition. Because when you leave demolition, people have to rebuild. Changes have to be made. Okay? You don't leave anything behind, because if you don't leave demolition, the same thing is going to happen when you're gone. My mission was to die creating nothing but havoc and destruction in the name of justice. That was my mission. So I moved into my 7.5 years. I did a number of things as I was helping other inmates get free that created a law that's still on the books today that I used to get my kingpin conviction overturned. And let me give you an idea, because this is very important. The crazy part about the way I had to move through the system is that when I made the law, it was a law that I created in my own case, but I couldn't use it in my case because I knew they were going to deny me. And this is very important for me to say as an attorney, because I work in the system. And I want to qualify the things that I'm saying, because I can't work in a system I don't believe in. Right? This is very, very important for me to say. The things that I'm saying is not good, but I want to make sure that everybody understands. I cannot do the things that I do. I cannot be an attorney, and I cannot work within a system that I don't believe in. I know that the system is not the problem, it's the people.
All right.
It's people. The system didn't send me to prison, a person did, a judge and a prosecutor and lying police. So let me give you an example of what I mean when I say that. If my engine in my car was blown and I went to crank the car up, it wasn't going to work because it's broken. If I give you the key and you try to crank it up, it's not going to work. It's broken. When you see the system work for one group of people, but don't work for others, you know that the system's not broken, because a broken system works for nobody. Okay? It doesn't work for anyone. So we know it's not broken because we know that there's people that it works for. So what we have to do, understanding that it works, is to make sure it works for us. That's what we have to do. We have to ensure that it works for us. The moment we say that a system is broken, we're giving it an excuse for not working for us. We're actually giving it an excuse. It's not broken. It's people who are using it against us. That's what's happening. And we have to turn around and pull out our sword, and like I always say, this is a saying of mine, get mud on our boots and blood on our knife. Okay? Yes. And this is a metaphor. So think about it for a second. You got a crime that happens in a community, a person gets shot, a person gets killed, we call that a violent crime. That's not more violent than the system. The system is a very, very violent phenomenon. It takes lives every day. It's destructive. And so even though somebody's not walking in a courtroom, shoot them up, bang, bang, the devastation is far worse. We have to be in a position to understand our reality, where we're at, and to take our gifts and to use them for the betterment of ourselves and the betterment of our brothers and sisters. At the end of the day, in my 7.5 years, I was in a courtroom. I had 70 years left on my life plus 70. I got my life sentence reversed by using a law I made in another person's case because I couldn't use it in mine. So I used it in his case, made new law. I took that life sentence, that new law, I got my own reversed. They saw me coming after that happened. And they said, okay, you know what? We see what you did. Okay, we'll throw out your life sentence, but we're going to affirm all these other convictions with the 70 years. So I still got 70 years to do. That's not a problem. Because I got the angel of God on my shoulder. So that's just okay. What do? I go in a courtroom 7.5 years later. I put a police officer on the stand, a veteran cop, 27 years, 30 years on the force. And I got him to confess on the stand. He confessed how I got out of prison. I didn't get out of prison because these laws I created. I didn't get out of prison because I wrote incredible briefs like how I got other people out of prison. I got out of prison myself personally because I got a police officer, a white cop, who at 7.5 years later now was the chief of the police academy. He had everything to lose. I got him. I was so good at that time. God had gifted me, had sharpened my gift so well that he could not withstand the pressure that I had on him on that stand. He sent himself to prison so that I could go free.
Wow.
I come home. Doesn't end. I come home to a loving family, a crying mother. There's so many of us that comes home and they're gone. But God didn't allow that to happen. I come home, and what do? I start my life from scratch. Remember something. All I had was a high school diploma when I did these things. I did this with a high school diploma. The TV show has me getting my license in prison, but that's not really what happened. It wasn't that easy. I came home. I did 4 years undergraduate, 4 years in college. Came out of prison 7.5 years, went straight into another institution, 4 years undergraduate. I then did 3 more years law school. 7.5 years in prison, 7 more years in school. I graduate on time, and I passed the bar.
Go ahead.
Now, you're not going to clap for this.
Yes, we will.
They investigated me 9 more years before they gave me a license. 9 years. This is important for us as a community to understand the things that face us, the challenges that we have, and what's inside of us that sometimes we don't know, the strengths that are inside of us as a people. I spent 14 years of my life coming to a point to be halted, just to be halted, and to be investigated, mind me, for no reason. Well, there was a reason. For 9 years, they made me wait. Why? I'm not being a lawyer, I can't eat. If I'm not eating, I might do something stupid. Okay? I might do something crazy because I can't eat, I can't feed my family. So let's hold out. We're not going to deny him his license because we can't. Let's just make him wait for the next 9 years. What they didn't understand that I would have reached for that license 100 years from now from the grave. I would have waited him out. If it was 50 years, 60 years, 100 years, they were going to give me the license. Ultimately, I got it. So, I'm going to say this and I'm going to end. I got the license, but let me tell you how this license works. Set aside all the things all the people that I've helped thus far. Set aside everything that I've went through. And let's talk about Akbar for a second, because this license played a part in that.
Go ahead.
I saw Akbar for the first time. I didn't know him, but I saw Wayne. I saw Wayne 35 years ago. When I saw Wayne, I was looking at a TV through the bars of a jail cell, waiting to get life in prison myself. That's when I saw him. He got life in prison 1 year, I got life in prison the next year. This is significantly important for us to understand what this means. He gets life in prison 1 year, the very next year, the following year, I'm in prison for life. 35 years later, I'm here to get him out. With that license. With that license. So that's why I needed to come back. I needed to say this, to come back to show you guys, after looking at this documentary, how this license was developing 35 years ago in order to effectuate a man that I saw on a TV after being sentenced to life himself. So we're going to get Wayne home. I'm sorry I was long-winded with this, but and in ending and getting Wayne home, and this is something important for me to say. There will only be one person in that courtroom that's going to be able to give a judge and a prosecutor a first-hand understanding of not only the culture of our environment, the tragedies, the destruction of our community. If you looked at a lot of the destruction that you saw on TV, that wasn't about crack. That happened in the 70s. Crack was a way of us to escape the destruction that you was looking at. Okay, our communities was just being destroyed before crack ever came along. Yes. But there will be no one else in that courtroom that's going to be able to give them a first-hand view of what it meant to live in that era, the challenges that we faced, the vulnerabilities that we had to deal with, and the desperation that caused us to make bad judgments. There's not going to be anyone else in the courtroom that's going to be able to give them that bird's eye view. And I think that's one of the most significant things that Wayne is going to have going against him, outside of the fact that God's going to be with me when I go in.
Yes. So I just want to, because we are pushing for our time, but I just want to say to the audience, just a reminder that fair sentencing was signed by President Obama. First Step was signed by President Trump. The next step, which is it features compassionate release, is something that we need to push. It is the legislation that has been co-authored by Senator Cory Booker and Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman. We need to push, we're not just from this area, but we need to tell our friends, we need to, even our Republican friends, because you see, it has to be something that is from across the aisle. We have to encourage our congressmen here to stretch across the aisle to make sure that the next step is made into a law and it's not just some type of pending legislation that just goes on forever and ever. So that's what that is our call to action tonight. That you spread the word about this documentary and that you push for the next step. You can Google it to see what everything is in it. You can make a phone call. You can write to Senator Booker to support, or to Congressman Watson Coleman, or to someone that you don't even know. Because you see, Doug Collins was on here. All right, so it doesn't have to be your own. We just need to make sure that everyone hears from us that we need this to be legislation. Okay? Can we do that?
Yes.
So I just want to thank you all because we're over our time. I want to thank the filmmakers, Thomas Freeman, Millionaire Social Justice Advocate, and the Honorable Isaac Rice Jr. Right, everyone. And thank you for the collaboration with the Wayne Akbar Foundation for Change and the NAACP. More to come.
If I can just say one last thing before you leave, there's a link, there's, I believe Jeff might have passed around papers, but there's a link to the change.org. If you could, it's a QR code. You can sign the petition, share it on your social media, share it with friends and family, text it. Make sure that we get as many signatures as possible. It would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.